Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Thank you again for tuning in. This week, we have a writer and reporter who's been in the sport of boxing, covering the sport of boxing as press for over 20 years. He's also a high school educator in the Southern California area. He has wrote for BoxingScene.com, Ring TV, for his local newspaper in Southern California, the Ventura County Star, and he's also contributed to other mediums, if you want to describe it like that. He's been around the boxing game, attending many fights, not even just the big fights. He's attended the smallest cards that you can think of to the biggest cards that you can think of. So this gentleman is definitely a fan's fan. He's a writer's writer. I met him probably over a decade ago, or within the last 10 years or so, at events. I've seen him at events multiple times. We've messaged with him on our accounts on social media multiple times. He's a great guy. We talked about his background and career, how he got into the sport of boxing in terms of journalism. He talks about his time, or his current time, as a high school teacher in Southern California, how he balances both of those careers, how he decided, I guess, to go towards being a high school teacher and a writer and reporter for the sport of boxing, how he balances both of those careers. He talks about also being a soccer coach in the United States in Southern California, which he also does. And he also has a family, a very young family that, he's a very busy guy. He's a very busy guy. So we're definitely here at the Last Round. We're definitely grateful and appreciative of his time that he was able to give us this week and give us a time, just about an hour he gave us on this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. And we talked about Keyshawn Davis's missing weight. He goes over on those details about that situation, and obviously Davis and his altercation backstage following the fight. We talk about Canelo Crawford, and then Dana White as a promoter, Netflix as the platform, thoughts on TKO and the boxing league that's currently developing, obviously with Canelo Crawford being the launching pad for the first event. We talk about looking back, actually, at Vasily Lomachenko's career, where obviously boxing fans know Lomachenko just recently posted a video where he announced his retirement from the sport. So we discuss that information, those details, a look back on memorable fights and moments in Vasily Lomachenko's career. We talk about Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, those young fighters in and around those weight classes. And we also talk about how we look at media members in today's landscape in terms of balancing honesty and reporting and writing, because there has been a couple times, specifically with one fighter who's been retired for quite a few years now, where our guest has had, I don't want to say an incident, but there were some criticisms levied to this fighter from our guest that the fighter wasn't appreciative of. So we talk about how reporters and media members and writers and all that balance honesty, at least from his point of view, how he looks at it in terms of the landscape of covering the sport of boxing, in terms of honesty and reporting the news and providing analysis in the sport. So that's a very interesting conversation that we touch on. So I want to get to our guest of the week. As I mentioned, he is a writer and reporter for Boxing Scene, the Ventura County Star newspaper, and Ring TV, just to name a few. Our guest this week on the Last Round Boxing Podcast is Francisco Salazar.
And now It's time for the last round interview of the week.
So before we kind of get into like obviously some latest developments in the sport of boxing, for fans who might be listening who might not be aware of your background or who you are, you're based in Southern California, and you're also an educator. You're a teacher, but I essentially want to start on the boxing side. You know, what's your earliest memory of boxing as a child? Like when you maybe like. Were you watching it with your parents, with your family? What is the earliest memory you have?
Yeah, I mean, that's a trip back memory lane. Earliest I can remember was watching Wide World of Sports. So back in the day, ABC, Free TV had Wide World of Sports. And it was always a marquee or world title fight from anywhere from France, Italy, United States, Las Vegas. So if I remember correctly, it was Evander Holyfield against Dwight Muhammad Quali from Atlanta. And I want to say back in 1986, 87. I don't remember if it was the first fight or the rematch. And I remember distinctly it was a Saturday because my dad, a former farm worker, used to work in the fields on a Saturday. And then he had that particular Saturday off, and we just happened to watch the fight. And that was my earliest memory of boxing. And then a few years later, watching my dad, February 10th, February 11th, 1990, the day that James Buster Douglas, a 42-1 underdog, pulled off the spectacular upset win over Mike Tyson. So from then, those are my fond memories. The Julio Cesar Chavez fights during the early to mid 90s and the great Mike Tyson fights. Yeah, that's my earliest memories of boxing before beginning to write about boxing.
Who would you say was your favorite fighter growing up?
Well, I really gravitated to Marco Antonio Barrera. What a beautiful fighter to watch. He got to start with foreign boxing here in Southern California. So he would fight a lot on foreign boxing. Back then, the promoter was Tony Curtis. And he would fight in Inglewood at the Great Western Forum. He would fight in Las Vegas at the Tropicana. So he would fought pretty much regularly, I think 4 or 5 times a year. Those fights would always be shown on Prime Tickets in Southern California or on KCAL 9. So it was a real treat to watch him fight. And I know that my dad gravitated to him before Barrera fought on HBO in the mid-90s.
So was Barrera also your dad's favorite fighter at the time?
At the time, my dad liked him. I think my dad really gravitated to Julio Cesar Chavez. My dad was a big fan of Ricardo Finito Lopez. My dad really, my dad, even though my dad was born in Mexico, grew up in Mexico, became a U.S. citizen, but my dad really liked boxing. He really loved Larry Holmes. My dad really enjoyed watching Sugar Ray Leonard. Many of the great fighters from the 70s and 80s. My dad, obviously during the heavyweight reign in the 70s with Ken Norton, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Larry Holmes later. Yeah, my dad was a fan of boxing, but then later on, he really just, if it was a fighter, he really enjoyed either the technical or the come forward Mexican style. Any type of boxing, my dad really enjoyed, whether it was fighters from the United States or fighters from Mexico. But my Barrera was one of the few that my dad really enjoyed watching.
Now, I mentioned at the onset of the episode that you're an educator, you're a public educator, a teacher. But did you ever consider, getting into like the journalism world or reporting world because of your interest in sports like that?
So it's funny how I stumbled upon fightnews.com back in 1999, and I ended up speaking to Flat Top. His real name was Scott Pope, and he was one of the associate editor of Fight News. Carl Freitag is editor-in-chief. So we talked, and then he said, well, would you like to write for Fight News? And I said, well, I don't have a journalism degree. I was at the time getting my bachelor's degree in history. Oh, it doesn't matter, So I remember my first assignment was interviewing Joel Casamayor, the great Cuban fighter, world champion. And then for the last 25 years, May 2000 was my first article I wrote, and it's been 25 years later. So it's sort of what kind of became like a project now has become something that I really enjoy, sort of like a pseudo career. But yeah, as you mentioned, the job that pays the bills is being a high school history teacher and a girls soccer coach at a nearby high school.
What do you remember about that Casa Mayor interview?
I remember asking him just explaining just little on nuances of just being a contender, adjusting from the amateur game to the pro game. I remember distinctively him telling me that when he won a gold medal for Cuba, I think his reward or his pay was a bicycle and a couple of chickens. That was his reward. You would think, the Cuban government would shower him with money or whatnot, but he was just given a bicycle and a few chickens. That was his reward for winning a gold medal. And I think that's what began the process for him to declare asylum and later on become a U.S. citizen. And then now, now he's a trainer based out of Vegas.
What was the first fight you covered on site as credentialed media?
That would be back. Bye. I know. We'll go later. That was my little one. He's busy. Okay. My first fight I covered live. It's okay, buddy. First fight I covered live was back in 2001, March 2001. It was a club show at a restaurant in the San Fernando Valley called the Odyssey in Granada Hills. And local kids from, LA, the Valley, and so South LA, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was like a 6-fight card. I think the main event ended up with a split draw. I don't remember the fighters off the top of my head, but it was one of those things where you could just remember little highlights here and there. But I'd have to go back to Box Rec. But it was March 2001, and then 3 months later, June 2001, I covered another fight card at the Hollywood Park Casino in Inglewood. And on that show, in his third pro fight was none other than Nonito Donaire. And he won by knockout. I think he knocked out someone by the name of Manuel Noriola. And how funny that still we talk about Nonito Donaire. He's fighting Saturday in Argentina. So it's crazy how the longevity of his career and then and now, and you still cover Nonito all of these years.
Did you ever have a moment, especially at the early onset of your career when you kind of were a little bit starstruck, or you covered a fight or you interviewed a fighter, who obviously had a high profile, and you kind of thought to yourself, like, man, like, how did I get in this position? Like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
I'd be lying to say it hasn't happened once. I mean, when you meet someone that you see on TV and you were like, wow, I'm actually interviewing him. One would be Sugar Ray Leonard. Could not be any more nicer. Oscar, Floyd, Manny. I mean, Canelo. You just meet so many fighters, and then you get to either talk to them more, get to know them more. The thing that's always struck me about boxers, and I've dealt with other athletes in the professional realm, was that I've always felt boxers are the more down to earth, more to give, sign an autograph, or to take a selfie. And I'll never forget this. I was on the Mayweather Canelo press tour. I did 2 shows. I think one in for sure Washington D.C. and the other one was I think in either New York City but the one in Washington D.C. I was there and I took my nephew with me. God rest his soul. But the one thing that always struck about Floyd Mayweather was he signed every autograph, signed every glove, signed every poster. And I remember Leonard Ellerby, his manager, telling Floyd, hey, we have to go, catch a plane or do whatever. And Floyd said, no, I'm going to sign every autograph. I'm going to sign every glove. I'm going to sign every poster. So that sort of allowed me to see the other side of boxers that maybe you don't see normally. And, like I said, I've always felt boxers really personify, where they have a really good relationship with fans and they're willing to just sign a photo, sign autograph. I mean, it just all those years when you see fighters on TV, and then you kind of look at them in a way that maybe the media or other people don't sort of see. It's really good to sort of witness that over the years.
So saying that, because I've been at the Mayweather boxing gym and have seen Floyd in training and stuff. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But so you believe, because some people don't, they really believe that that's him, but you believe that the personality that he had throughout his career, especially during the HBO 24/7 days and stuff, isn't really him.
In a way, yes and no. I think, some things maybe he trolls for the media trolls or wants people to see a certain light of him, or maybe just things that maybe you hear from people and that's how he really is. Or maybe just there's the way that he wants to be portrayed in the media. And then there's the real Floyd Mayweather with his family and close friends. I do know that, in front of the camera, he acts a certain way. But as I mentioned, maybe not in front of the lights, he acts a different way. But I do know for many years, I think it was leading up to the Victor Ortiz fight, him and Leonard Ellerbe gave me the moniker of the honest guy. So I kind of wear that throughout all the years because if people know me, I've always been very honest and consistent. My social media reflects that. And I've always felt that, him labeling me as the honest guy says really a lot about maybe him reading people and him just understanding, well, maybe someone who he could talk more in detail with, or maybe some person that he puts up sort of like a wall, just only says a certain amount without him telling everything.
But how do you balance that? Because we've had this conversation on past episodes here. But as a writer, reporter, who's been in the sport on the media side for over 20 years now, sometimes you're going to have fighters who don't like what you write or don't like what you say or opine. I've seen some posts where you give your opinion, and some fighters, they block you on social media, and you're just like, what? Well, I just I'm giving my analysis of what I think. Like, how do you balance as a writer and reporter in boxing or in a professional sport? How do you balance that honesty from your point of view, but also trying to gain access to the fighters and the camps to kind of build stories and develop stories?
Great question. I think, at least for me, I can't speak for other writers and other members of the media, but for me, at least, I always hope that my honesty and who I really am comes across as that, just being honest. It's sometimes you have to be sort of brutally honest, and then sometimes you just have to say things, but in no way is it personal or you're out to get somebody. I had a conversation actually a few weeks ago with Frank Espinosa, the manager, and I saw him because he manages Ricardo Ruvalcaba, an unbeaten junior welterweight or middle welterweight. He fought a couple weeks ago in Hollywood. So he asked me something in regards to his fighter. He's decent prospect becoming a contender. And I gave my opinion about Ricardo, his skill set. And then he mentioned something. You know what, Francisco? That's one thing about you, that you're very honest and you're very upfront. It's maybe something that I may not like to hear, or maybe other managers, people may not hear, but at least you're honest and consistent. So if it's something that I say in the context of an analysis, or it's me being honest, but in the years I've covered boxing, it's what I've seen, but in no way is it personal or should ever be taken personal. I don't write an article, or I don't in a way base it in a negative connotation way, or say it with a way to get back at somebody or say negative. It's just something that comes across as honest and is consistent. At least if when it's written, I have evidence to back up what it is that I'm portraying or I'm writing, or if it's an analysis, at least I back up what I say and how in the way I say it as well.
Have you had any instances in the past where you gave out some type of analysis or some type of opinion, and a fighter or somebody on their team, was upset at what you said, and they obviously said something, or maybe they said something on social media, or they blocked you, like I mentioned, but then you ended up subsequently sometime later connecting with them and kind of discussing the situation, be like, hey, this is what I think. I still think he's a great fighter, or she's a great fighter, but you kind of hashed it out a little bit.
It took me a while to refresh my memory, but I think if you're referring to when I got blocked by Andre Ward, yes, that was.
I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, the time I got blocked by Andre Ward because I mentioned something effective where in the first fight with Sergey Kovalev, I thought that Kovalev edged it out, and he took it the wrong way and blocked me, and I mentioned something, and then the Goosen family, because remember, Andre used to be promoted by Dan Goosen, so the Goosen family took my side. Oh, that's typical Andre Ward. You can't take it. But there was a former fighter, to my knowledge. I don't think he's fighting at the moment, where during a fight, he didn't make adjustments to where I thought he could have made adjustments to make the fight easier. And I posted something, nothing saying that he's a bad fighter, nothing saying, well, he's the worst fighter in the world. It was just mentioning that in the fight, certain exchanges, he could have boxed more, could have used his jab more, could have used advantages in his skill set to make the fight easier. And then I was bombarded by the fighter's mother on social media and calling out that I'm probably a horrible teacher or I'm probably a horrible person. And it wasn't that I was caught off guard. It was more amusing because this person doesn't know me, and other than what I said about her son. And later on, a couple of years later, I saw this fighter and we shook hands. Never mentioned what I'd said or taken it back to what his mother posted on social media. So I move on. Things are said and I don't forget, but I just move on because to me, there's more important things in life to worry about than what people say on social media or what people accuse you of. I just say, well, if people really know me for who I am, they'll take that in context or my character or my reputation in boxing, not necessarily about what one person said because I said something negative about their kin.
Who would you say, if you can, I know it'd probably be difficult, but who would you say in boxing, whether it's fighter, manager, somebody on somebody's team, like who is like the ultimate good person or good guy or good girl like that you've met in your time covering the sport, and every time you come into contact with them, you're like, man, they're really good people?
I have to go back a ways. Ricardo Jimenez, the former top-ranked publicist, great person, went out of his way to have you interview a fighter, and it's too bad he passed away. Currently, at the moment, people like Gabe Ribas for Top Rank, not only is he a great publicist and a great person to talk to, but he's also an excellent translator. Mm-hmm. I could list so many people off the top of my head. Janie Murcia, the publicist for Golden Boy. If I don't say their names, it's not that I think them less, but usually it's publicists. Like I mentioned, Frank Espinosa. Frank Espinosa has been nice enough to open his door to invite me to Oscar Valdez when he won his first world title. I was invited over. When he had a Super Bowl party, I was invited over with my dad. Joel De La Hoya, Oscar De La Hoya's older brother, former, when Oscar fought, he was one of his seconds. And Joel and I talk often and talk about the fighters he manages. And I've been meaning to have him come to my classroom to talk about boxing economics because who knows better about contracts with his brother than someone like Joel De La Hoya. Tom Loeffler, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Tom Loeffler, and just had lunch with him this past Saturday after the open media workout with 360 Boxing Promotions. The list is endless of promoters, managers, publicists, fighters that I could name, and it's just like I said, off the top of my head, I can't remember everybody, but there's a lot of really great people in boxing, and they are very generous. Or if I want to interview a fighter, yes, let's make it happen. Can I interview so-and-so? Yeah, let's coordinate times. So, I mean, in the 25 years in boxing, I've really seen a lot of great people come and go. Some, I enjoyed speaking in a non-boxing setting. So that's really some of the people that stand out to me that really I enjoyed speaking with, boxing or non-boxing.
Transitioning to some latest developments in the sport. We talked about just before we came on air about Keyshawn Davis. Yeah, obviously just recently had a scheduled fight. He missed weight about over 4 pounds over. I believe he lost his WBO title as well. And then there was on fight night, his brother was also fighting, and there was a subsequent altercation backstage. That obviously didn't look good. It didn't look good for Top Rank. It didn't look good for Keyshawn Davis. What did you think about that? Covering the sport for over 20 years and attending fights in person, interviewing all these fighters, managers, and all that. When you see something like this, even though we've seen stuff like this before, you talked about Mayweather's Ab Judah during that fight when they were in the middle of the ring. Stuff like this happens. But when you see like that, I mean, do you get used to it? Do you kind of get numb to it because you've kind of seen it over 20 years?
Nothing in boxing surprised me anymore because I guess maybe, it's numbing, or you can't really say accept it because accepting means you think it's okay with it. First off, having known Bob Arum and knowing the people at Top Rank, if there's one thing that Bob Arum and Top Rank dislike the most or find unprofessional is when fighters come in way overweight. And so that would strike one for Keyshawn Davis. Considering the fact it was a homecoming, Top Rank went out of the way and they had people from Norfolk like Michael Vick and other people from the area, take part in any of the festivities prior to the weigh-in, during the weigh-in, during fight night. So a lot of things were done for Keyshawn to really make this a homecoming fight against Edwin De Los Santos. Then Keon Davis ended up losing, or Kelvin Davis, I'm so sorry. He ended up losing to Nahir Albright. And then that's when the things went from bad to worse. Or as Steve Kim said, he remembered when the worst thing that happened that weekend was when Keyshawn Davis missed weight. But then you had not just one, but two, I guess, skirmishes involving Nahir Albright and the Davis clan. And yeah, it was a bad look because, and one thing is, you lose a fight, you shake hands, move on. In this case, for whatever reasons happened where the Davis family went to Nahir Albright's dressing room and maybe they heard them celebrating. But yeah, that was a bad look, not just for parties involved, but it was just a bad night for boxing when sometimes boxing is too much on the bad side or the negative press or the stereotypes of what we hear boxing all the years. I'm sure Bob Arum, Carl Moretti had a talk with the Davis family, and I'm sure, but Keyshawn's too talented to sort of sit too long on the sidelines. So I'm sure whatever was discussed is kept in house, and then I'm sure they're going to have Keyshawn fight later. Maybe they're talking about a rematch between Keyshawn and Nahir Albright because in their first fight, Keyshawn barely edged out a majority decision, and then there was the instance where he was tested positive for a banned substance. Now that fight was a no contest. So if Keyshawn, when he's brought back, it'll be brought back, later this year. But I'm sure Keyshawn, made a statement that he apologized and for the occurrences that happened throughout that weekend. And you just hope that a fighter in his stage learns from it, grows, and I'm sure this is going to stick with him for a while. But it's to the point where he learns from this, moves forward, and becomes a better person and a better fighter from the situation.
Do you think that because right now, we believe, when my co-host Mike and I, when we discuss certain news in the sport, a couple months ago we had talked about Keyshawn Davis, and has the potential to fill that hole as the next American draw. Just because there hasn't really been one for a while. Do you think Keyshawn Davis is maybe, even regardless of this situation that just happened with earlier this month, do you think he's the closest to that position in the United States, or do you think it's still open to whoever can grab it?
I think right now it's probably open only because Keyshawn, not a lot of people know of him outside of Norfolk or the Virginia area. For right now, the closest thing could be Terrence Crawford, but he's slowly, winding down his career. So after Terrence Crawford, well, who's would be the next person that would take over the reins? Could be Bam Rodriguez. Jesse Rodriguez has excelled, and he could be, someone that could take over Keyshawn as well. I know some people are throwing Shakur, but then the inactivity and then the disputes or contract or issues with Top Rank, and then he decided to sign with Eddie Hearn. So it's wide open now because and that's sort of what many media members like myself, the activity with sometimes fighters aren't active enough, and if they were active, they would have their name out there. Unfortunately, they're not active enough to where they take long stretches or they fight once a year. And you want, to go back to the years where Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns and would fight regularly, even between world title fights. How often would we see, if you look at BoxRec, when Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler would fight in a world title fight, they would fight in a 10-round non-title fight 2-3 months later, and then would fight 2-3-4 months later in a world title fight. And that's the really bad Achilles heel of boxing right now. The fact that sometimes fighters are signed to a network, and we saw that with fighters with PBC, and they were aligned to the network with which PBC was aligned to. And, you only hope that, with more promoters, in this case, lately we have now ProBox TD with Gary Jonas, and there's dates, and he's willing and able to work with other promoters like PBC and Top Rank, Samson Likovitz. So would we hope to see more fighters fight often to where there'd be a name, and then we could sort of anoint a great American superstar? Yeah, that's wishful thinking, and we're hoping that fighters sort of wake up and understand that they need to market themselves, they need to fight often and put themselves out there. So not only is just diehard boxing fans, but other people who follow sports at least know what's going on with who the fighters are and what's going on with the sport of boxing.
You mentioned Samson Lukowitz right now, and there was some reports. I haven't seen if it was confirmed. It might be, but I'm asking you for what you've heard about him and Edwin De Los Santos kind of splitting. Have you heard anything about that? I know it's like recent developments within the last couple days or so.
Yeah, so that's what's come out in the news this morning, where the reported split, and I guess whether it's just it's just the talk around the water cooler where De Los Santos is looking to sign with James Prince. So Samson Likovitz is actually a boxing promoter, and people kind of mistaken him as a manager, but he's actually a boxing promoter. He promotes Sebastian Fundora, Ring Magazine champion Gabriela Fundora, and other fighters. So as a promoter, they split, with the whole debacle, with the whole Keyshawn Davis situation. He backed away because with the whole weight advantage and discrepancy with 149 pounds or 150 pounds can weigh more than a certain amount. And in the end, Samson thought it was just best not to fight for the health and safety of Edwin. From where Edwin probably thought, well, I would want to fight. And I guess there was something that came out with Top Rank and Samson and involved with Edwin that I guess he only kept half his purse. So it'll be interesting to see where Edwin ends up from the promoter aspect, unless James Prince leaves the manager aspect of his career or manager label and takes on the promoter role. But yeah, I guess that's for sure, or that's now a thing where that's now moving forward is now Samson and Edwin just decided to split up or Edwin chose to not be promoted by Samson, or Samson just felt it's better to just move on from Edwin.
Transitioning to the Canelo Crawford fight that was officially announced already, and then Dana White is announced as a lead promoter, and then it's going to be on Netflix. Netflix already has it on their streaming platform, as you know, you can get a reminder for the scheduled date in September. What's your take on that entire situation? Because a lot of people a year ago, 2 years ago, saying, "Oh, that fight's never going to happen." They're like 20 pounds apart, essentially. Which makes sense, right? But obviously, we got to it. What was your reaction to hearing the rumblings and then officially hearing that it was happening? But also, I wanted to get your take on, where else could they go in terms of like opponents? They've already kind of accomplished a lot, especially Canelo, in terms of fighting at 154, 160, 168. And he is a star, but he also needs like some type of a dance partner across from him. So is it kind of like they're both kind of in the same spot where they're like, well, what else could we do? We're both stars. Crawford, I'll go up 20 pounds or so, 15 pounds, and let's do it.
So a lot of boxing fans will say, well, Canelo only had to do was, fight David Benavidez. And I'm sure a lot of boxing fans would prefer David Benavidez over Terrence Crawford. No disrespect to Terrence, but I think Terrence wants the biggest challenge and feels that, for lack of a better term, that what was going on at 154 wasn't for him, or he felt that there wasn't anybody at 154 pounds that would challenge him. 160 pounds is kind of like a wasteland at the moment, where no one really is not a viable option as far as like a name fighter. So he felt, well, I want to sort of be great. I already beat the fighter that many people regard as the best welterweight in boxing, in Errol Spence. So I took care of that, and then he defeated Madrimov last August in LA. So I'm happy to move up and move up to 168, and it'll be interesting because where would he fight at? Will he be more closer to 168, or will he be weighing at 161, 162, not middleweight, but technically as a super middleweight? Because obviously he doesn't want to walk into the fight too heavy. He wants to, be as light to sort of box and outbox Canelo. Now that's a reality. It's a compelling fight only because can Terrence withstand the power punches of Canelo, the ring savvy Canelo, and can Canelo, follow through and cut off the ring and not allow Terrence to utilize his skill set and to take advantage of his advantages of moving around the ring and boxing. And it's a compelling clash. I personally think that Canelo could have fought David Benavidez, or maybe there was a fight for Terrence to fight Virgil Ortiz, and that fight would have been big in Texas. But now that's the reality. We have to now look at what's factual, what's in front of us, and may the best man win. I had someone ask me, who do you think wins? And I'm kind of still processing each fighter's advantages and their setbacks and disadvantages. But now it's to the point where at least this fight on Netflix, we're more eyes can see, not just in this country, but worldwide. It'll be at least the selling point where you have this marquee name fight taking place in Vegas on Mexican Independence Weekend, and may the best man win.
Who, in your career, could you think of any fight that comes to mind where, a great, and I don't want, for lack of a better term, little guy in terms of Crawford coming, being the lower weight class, goes up to fight another great, essentially bigger guy in Canelo in a higher weight class. Is there any fight that comes into mind right away when I say that?
Back in 2000, when Shane Mosley jumped 2 weight classes to fight Oscar De La Hoya, their first fight with Shane winning a close decision. Another fight back in 2003 when Roy Jones Jr., then the light heavyweight king, went up to heavyweight and outboxed and beat John Ruiz. Those are the few that kind of stand out more now as far as fighters that jump multiple weights to fight a champion or to find a marquee name and win decisively, or not win decisively, but win. But it'll be interesting to see how this fight with Terrence moving up 2 weight classes, and again at 154 as the junior middleweight champion, but I really doubt he will go up to the max 168. But if he's fighting at 162, moving up 8 pounds, won't be as a setback for him to utilize his skill set as he would if I'm 168 pounds. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and if it sort of matches when Shane Mosley went up in weight to fight Oscar, and with Roy Jones Jr. moving up in weight to fight John Ruiz.
So Canelo has said in interviews that this is going to be like his last rodeo fighting with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and that association over there. Because I think he has said in the past that he wants to retire like around 37, 38 years old. I think he said 37. So, do we see a Benavidez fight in the future following this fight? Or, obviously if the Crawford fight is a very good fight, or if it's close, people are going to ask for a rematch. Maybe it's going to be a demand there. How do you see it playing out if you just had to speculate?
Well, it depends on what weight, because now David Benavidez is fighting at 175. So I doubt he moves down to 168. So the only realistic thing would be if Canelo moves up to 175. So it also depends on, of course, money. Would Turkey offer David Benavidez a nice sum of money, and same thing with Canelo, for that fight to take place? So yeah, I think it's more of a wait and see. We have to wait and see how this fight plays out. And then afterwards, would it be conceivable to see Canelo fight a mandatory like Christian Mbili, or another another mandatory 160 pounds, or will he feel it's best to move it to 175 and then look at fighting David Benavidez, or fighting the rematch with Dmitry Bivol, which Canelo's always wanted to fight the rematch to sort of right that wrong for him. So I guess after September 13th, we'll have more clarity whether Canelo stays at 168 or decides to move up to 175 to finish out the rest of his career.
Do you expect Dana White as a lead promoter for this event to, I guess, structure this promotion as he does UFC events, or do you think he's going to try it in a different way?
It's going to be interesting, because I think Dana has to but just listen to people in boxing. I know he's a boxing fan. I know that Dana follows the sport, but at the same time, this is his first time as a boxing promoter, and there's things that he may run into that he probably didn't run into or encounter with UFC and mixed martial arts. So as far as pay scale, or thinking that maybe with boxing he could pay the same as with UFC, and that's not going to work, especially with schematics with boxing and a premium network, or we don't have that anymore, but with streaming services, where if you're going to have marquee fights or fighter A fighting fighter B, that there's a pay scale that sort of has to be in line with what boxing is. Because if you have fighters who have been paying, their purses are 6-7 figures, and then with Dana saying, well, maybe with this pay scale with UFC, a lot of fighters are just going to balk to that. He has to have someone who is boxing savvy, explain to him what routes or avenues are beneficial for all of boxing, not what he thinks it worked at UFC is going to work for boxing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. What my question is, after My question is, after September 13th, is what with TKO Boxing, is there going to be like a once a month, once every 2 months? What fighters are we going to see in that under that platform? So if there's something beyond September 13th, I'm all ears, as well as other boxing fans. But we're only hoping that it's not just one fight. Oh, well, maybe boxing's not for me, and he decides to exit. But it'll be interesting to see what other plans in the short and long term there are for boxing with Dana White.
What's your thoughts on the whole TKO boxing promotion now, or TKO league? Where do you think it leads? How's it going to affect, the paydays for fighters? Is it going to be like a UFC where it's like, kind of like the major leagues in terms of like, okay, that's the one spot where you want to go? What's your whole thoughts on the whole TKO boxing league right now?
I only hope that for the TKO boxing, they understand the business very well. I mean, because if you kind of if you're going to reinvent the wheel, it's only because you see the dynamic of boxing that didn't work out, but you find a fix, or you find something that could elevate or develop the sport in the right direction. So at the moment, I'm not aware of any fighters or big name fighters that are under the TKO banner. So would TKO Boxing willing to co-promote with other fighters under a different umbrella, with Top Rank or Golden Boy or PBC? So would you be willing to see TKO Boxing look to sign fighters that maybe with other promoters, fighters, their contracts have run out? Or with TKO Boxing, are they willing to look to maybe sign prospects that no one's heard of, fighters that maybe aren't under the watch with Top Rank and Golden Boy? So it'll be interesting to see which fighters or whom they sign, and whether it's like from fight to fight deals, or a year or 2 year deal, or a multi-fight deal. It's interesting to see how TKO Boxing approaches signing fighters fight by fight, year by year, or under a certain number of fights under one contract.
So we had Tom Loeffler, the head of 360 Boxing Promotions, on a couple weeks ago, about last month. And towards the end of the interview, I asked him about, because he has a publicized relationship with Dana White. Dana White's the 360 boxing cards are on UFC Fight Pass. Dana White has come to some 360 boxing events over here in LA, Montebello, and all that. So I asked Tom Loeffler about, if there's any relationship there, or in the future, or if he's going to be involved in some way with Dana White and TKO. Do you think he's going to be involved? Have you heard any rumblings behind the scenes? Because he didn't really give me an answer. He just kind of gave me a smirk. But, I would think, based on my experience, that something's coming down the pipe.
So Tom's very businesslike, but Tom's not going to, divulge. But if there is a promoter who could work with TKO Boxing, it could be Tom Loeffler, because he has a really good relationship with Dana White. As you mentioned, his fight cards are streamed with UFC Fight Pass. One of the fighters he promotes, Colin Walsh, he does a lot of publicity events at UFC events. Dana White has involvement with his career. So if there's one promoter at the moment that could eventually have a relationship or do a co-promotional relationship in between with Dana White, it wouldn't be surprised with Tom Loeffler. And I know he has a 4-fight deal to do shows at a Chumash. They did a show in February. There's an upcoming fight card taking place June 21st, and then there might be something in August where Tom promotes a show at Chumash. So it's interesting to see as far as sites, TKO, if there's a relationship with Tom Loeffler, where Chumash is used as a venue for TKO boxing events in the future.
I believe he has an event coming up next weekend, the 21st of June, with Callum Walsh. So, because we had talked about that when he was on last month. So he has that fight. And I think that's at Chumash Casino. Am I right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So that's coming up. That's over there, like a little bit north of Santa Barbara, but pretty much like Santa Barbara area, in that general area.
Yeah, it's about a 45-minute drive from Santa Barbara north, heading towards Santa Maria.
Right. On the Teofimo, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, all those young guys right now. I mean, what's your take on that entire weight class and those young fighters? I mean, have they all kind of just made so much money? They're all talented, but have they all just kind of made so much money that they're just kind of like, maybe the work ethic isn't there anymore as much as it should be?
Well, I've always felt that, because for a while it was Shakur, Teofimo, Ryan, and Devin, where they were called the Four Kings. And the only Four Kings that you should reference in boxing is Marvin and Roberto Duran, because not only did they fight often, but they fought each other. Outside of Devin fighting Ryan Garcia, and even Tank fighting Ryan Garcia, who, they haven't fought each other. I mean, there was talk of, and the verbal agreement that August 16th was the signed date with Devin Haney fighting Teofimo Lopez, and then that went to oblivion. So whether you believe the Haneys or you believe Teofimo, who said what and what, verbal agreements were followed through. Well, that fight didn't happen. So maybe it's a little of everything of why they haven't fought each other, or maybe why they only fight once a year. Obviously, what we had in my weekend with those fighters fighting in New York City in Times Square, that did not make casual fans want to watch, another future fight card with those fighters, because they didn't produce the type of fireworks as expected or as advertised. So again, it goes back to activity, and it's great that fighters want to have that platform. But after fighting on May 2nd, who's really dying to see, these fighters fight again? Again, it goes to the marketability. It goes to the activity. Maybe again, because they're getting big paydays, 6-7 figures, that they're only content to fighting once a year, or feel that there's going to be another payday down the line. But again, if you're asking the boxing consumer, they're going to be hesitant to shell out X amount of money for a pay-per-view or an X amount of money for tickets, because back on May 2nd, they didn't produce the type of fights that people wanted to see. So again, marketability, activity, all that matters. But if some of these fighters think that they're just going to get a payday, whether from Turkey or from Top Rank or for PBC, they're not putting themselves in the position for fight fans to want to see them fight.
Who do you think out of that group, of those young guys, has the potential to be the standout? Once they all retire and they get out of the sport, who's going to be the one with like the most reputable and biggest legacy as a fighter?
It's tough to say because they haven't fought each other. And I think that's one thing where the fighters from previous years, from the 70s, the heavyweights, or from the Haglers and the Leonards and Durans and Hearns, is that they fought each other. So having fought each other, some people could say, well, Duran stands out. Well, then people say, well, Leonard stands out because he forced Duran to quit. And, and Hearns and Hagler, the war that they had for 3 rounds, and the fight that Leonard beat Hearns, and the fact that Leonard beat Hagler, people will say that, well, maybe it's Leonard that has this. But they fought each other. And in this case, with the fighters that we have today, they haven't fought each other because there's always something with a platform or X amount of money in their contract, or this isn't what I agreed to, or we want this percentage from the pay-per-view sales. So until these fighters fight each other, it's kind of hard to say whom is the better, because Ryan Garcia has at least had that reputation. He's willing to fight. He's fought Tank. He's fought Devin Haney, but at the same time, he loses to Rolly Romero, and he got knocked out by Tank Davis. Teofimo, he at least he could say he's a Ring Magazine champion. Same with Devin Haney, but Teofimo has that one glaring loss to Kambosos, and what did Devin Haney do twice? He beat Kambosos very easily. So again, it's hard to assess which of these fighters um, could be considered great because they haven't fought each other, and it's still early in the career to where maybe Teofimo wins a world title at 147, or maybe Devin Haney could get his revenge against Ryan Garcia, or Devin will also win a world title bet at 147. So it's sort of wait and see. I'd like to see them fight and more often and eventually fight each other in the next year or two. But until they do, it's hard to pick which of those fighters is sort of the great fighter now and could be considered a great fighter later.
Crossing towards the finish line of this week's episode, and obviously we appreciate your valuable time, Francisco. Vasily Lomachenko just recently posted a social media post video announcing that he's retiring from the sport after so many moments that he's given the fans and all that. Looking back, I'm sure you covered quite a few of his fights, and you were able to interview him and all that. Looking back at his career, how do you assess it?
He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's nothing that can convince me otherwise. Not just the brilliant amateur career where he was 396-1, but he was also two-time Olympic boxing champion. He was a world champion in 3 weight classes. Of his 3 losses, the Teofimo Lopez fight was the one fight where he lost definitively. At least with the Orlando Salido fight, that was a close fight. It was a toss-up. Whom you thought won? I personally think that when I was there ringside, I thought that Lomachenko defeated Devin Haney 115-113. So it wasn't that he did not fight the fighters that he wanted to fight. He fought everybody. He fought those. If you look at his resume, he fought legit A caliber fighters. And he fought, and if you look back, then that loss to Teofimo looks really good now. I mean, because Teofimo has lost 1 fight, and look at the career he's had, both at 135 and 140 pounds. It's too bad that even with the Devin Haney close decision, Devin's had a unbeaten career with the asterisk with Ryan Garcia. So he's had a legit successful career, beating everybody, fighting everybody. And he will go down as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I was lucky enough to see him spar and train. He came here to Oxnard to train. And actually, he ended up sparring with Shakur Stevenson when Shakur Stevenson was 4-0, 5-0. So Shakur spent a few months here in Oxnard, sparring with Vasily. It was great to watch. Sparring wasn't allowed to record, which is fine. But later on, Vasily bought a house here in Camarillo, and he had a gym built at his house. So it was a pleasure to see him train, see him fight in person. What a gifted athlete, and people are remarked about, wow, his footwork. And it goes back to his father, Anatoly, getting him in ballet, all the ability to just utilize his footwork, and a gifted fighter who, again, it'll be pretty impressive to see someone that could match his skill set and his success at the amateur and professional level.
You bring up Oxnard, California, which is in Ventura County, where Robert Garcia, had a huge presence there. That's where his family grew up and all that before they moved to Riverside, California. What's the state of the Oxnard and Ventura boxing scene today? Ever since Robert Garcia primarily moved his gym to the Riverside, California area.
So there's a big amateur boxing program. There's a number of gyms in Oxnard and in Ventura. And I actually, as a teacher, some of my students go to, I forgot the name of the gym. It's near 5 Points in Oxnard, but they'll go to their train 2-3 times a week. And I've always said that boxing is a great way for young men and women to find discipline in their life. And some of these kids heeded my advice, and now they train. So there's a lot of gyms in the area, and there's also one gym over the Great in Newbury Park, which is next to Thousand Oaks. It's 101 Boxing. That's where Alexander Volsik trains at. That's where Mean Machine trains at. Joshua Lupia, and then being welterweight, he's like 16-0. He trains there. I know that the fighter from Fresno, promoted by Matchroom, off the top of my head, I can't remember his name, lost recently. He comes here to train often, but I've always felt that Oxnard, yeah, there's fighting in the streets, but I mean, Oxnard is really a city of champions. And it started with Robert Garcia, the first world champion out of Oxnard, then Fernando Vargas. Both Fernando Vargas and Robert Garcia graduated from Channel Islands High School, where I teach at. But Robert was not the first world champion out of Ventura County. The first world champion out of Ventura County was Lupe Aquino. He lives in Santa Paula. So the person that coined the term Boxnard is, of all people, Fernando Vargas' half-brother, Rogelio Romo. So he was the one that coined the term Boxnard, and it stuck. And it's great to see in the last 10, 12, 15 years, fighters from all over the world. Kelly Pavlik came from Ohio to come train in Oxnard. Nonito Donaire was trained by Robert Garcia. He came to train here. Marcos Maidana from Argentina came to train here. So, and then you have Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk has trained here in Oxnard. So, and you ask these fighters, why did they come to Oxnard? And it's just the weather, the sparring. You could run the hills behind Ventura towards the mountains, or you could run the beach. I mean, where else can you say that? Maybe a few places around the world, but it's great to see Oxnard still on the map, and it's great to see Ventura County on the map when it comes to boxing. And then that's what the local paper, the Ventura County Star newspaper, they want more boxing. And I'm like, okay, well, I'd be happy to do that for you, because it's just so much boxing. And if not the fighters, or there's a connection with Robert Garcia or the fighters that he trains here in Oxnard, where you really get a lot of young talent or world champions, or a lot of really gifted athletes or contenders that come and either want to live here, they train here. Mean Machine actually lived in Camarillo for a while. Now he lives in Moore Park. But again, they're just the reality is that just Oxnard is a great place to train and live.
Well, Francisco, we I appreciate your valuable time. I know we reached out to you earlier in the week, or I believe last week, and we were able to coordinate this. We've had you on our list to be a guest on the Last Round Boxing podcast for quite a while, so I'm glad we finally got this to happen. But before we finish up here, you want to go ahead and if you have any students listening, especially, I know some students follow you on social media and all that, and you obviously, you say you're a teacher at a high school in Ventura County as well. So I'm sure you have some students listening right now. If there's anything you want to give them to them, I'm sure you just had a graduating class that just graduating. So any parting words for them, and also go ahead and plug where everybody can find you on social media as well.
Yeah, it's great in my 22nd year as an educator to see young men and women graduate high school, move on with their life. Proud teacher at Channel Islands High School. I also coach girls soccer at Wanemi High School, building that program. I've had great talent with young ladies who now move on with their lives after high school. And I tell the kids at the end, it's all about you. Make the best. Teachers don't fail you fail yourself. And I may be hard at the beginning with students, and I tell sometimes athletes things that they don't want to hear. But at the end, we're here to provide you an avenue of success, and we're here to provide you with all the tools for you to be successful outside of high school. And you can only hope to have these young men and women listen to you. But people on your wonderful podcast could follow me on social media on F Salazar Boxing, F and then Salazar Boxing. And I do communicate back and forth with people who reach out to me. But yeah, my number one priority is teaching and coaching and enjoying the wonderful life of prize fighting and having my family as well.
Absolutely. Some great words from Francisco Salazar. So once again, from my co-host Michael Shepard, who couldn't make it this week, but we'll give you guys another regular episode in the next couple of weeks, like we usually do. And for our guest of the week in the Boxing Scribe from BoxingScene.com, Ring TV, the Ventura County Star newspaper, and others, he's been in the game for over 20 years, and he continues to do so. Our guest of the week, Francisco Salazar. I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.